I wouldn't worry too much about what Richard Tice has said about Ukraine. It's his opinion, and he's not running the party. He doesn't speak for me. I think he's a good MP for his constituency. They seem to be pleased with him. So you've got to allow him his opinion. He feels quite strongly about it. And personally, I think he's got it wrong, but it doesn't put me off having him as part of some form of government in the future. He's still better than the other two teams that are playing on the pitch. Thankfully, in the Express today, Nigel Farage has done his usual diplomatic self, assessed the situation, read it forward, just like President Trump, and come out basically on the side of President Trump. The Reform UK leader said that the Ukrainian president has had to wake up and smell the coffee whilst referring to a ceasefire with Russia. This is an article in the Express, so I'm going to read a little bit of it out to you. Nigel Farage claimed that Donald Trump is always 2 to 3 moves ahead. We can see that with the way he negotiates. Now, what you've got to look here, following the heated discussion on Friday, the Reform leader said that the Ukrainian president should wake up and smell the coffee about the ceasefire with Russia. He told LBC Radio, I think President Zelensky was very unwise to tell the Americans what to do. And what would happen to them if they don't back him. I think it was unwise. Yeah, sure, Vance and Trump bit back, but I think in diplomatic terms it was Zelensky who played it very badly. At last, someone with some common sense. Sadly, Julia Hartley-Brewer and Kelvin Mackenzie seem to have come down on the if you don't want war, you're a Putin apologist front, which is utterly ridiculous, because it's all right these journalists sat there in the nice heated studios or sat at home blogging from the flat as Kelvin is. What army are you coming to? You're not watching your loved ones getting blown to pieces every day, sat on a freezing cold battlefield, are you? You've not got a tourniquet on your leg, hoping to stop the bleeding, sat next to a dead body because you can't move it because you're still getting shot at. That's the reality of war, love. That's what it really means, Julia Hartley-Brewer, who seems to come down on the wrong side of quite a few things. The best thing to do is to not hold anybody in hero worship status. Nobody's your hero, nobody's your friend. They're just people getting on with politics and journalism. Some are good, some are bloody atrocious. I'm following a new girl, an American girl, that seems to have got it right. We've got to remember as well with Zelensky, what the public don't see, is before he went to see the president, and I've run this by Mitch Fierstein, who's advised the president, so he's pretty much in the know. Before he went to see the president, he called off at the Hayes Adams Hotel and spoke to senators, most of them warmongering senators, who were quite happy during the period that this was all kicking off over the last 15 years to see war in Ukraine, because they stood to profit from the military-industrial complex, many of whom have shares in such things. And they're quite happy as long as American blood's not being spilled. He had a meeting with them first before he saw Donald Trump, which emboldened him, as I said in yesterday's video. But he went in the wrong direction. Being bold turned into cockiness. I cannot believe in my wildest dreams that a man who's only served one term in office, due to the fact he's been installed rather than directly voted in. He was voted in democratically, but he went in on a ticket of peace to sign a deal with Russia on the Donbass. Russia didn't want to claim any land. As I've told you before, the original request was a 25-year lease for a seaport, and he didn't get it because the neocons interfered. Why are Americans interfering in other people's elections and then pretending that they're going in to fight, or, these are the neocons, to save democracy? Our leader's just as bad. It's got nothing to do with democracy, and if you research past wars like Iraq and Afghanistan, same script. They go in for democracy. That's what they have to sell you the idea, to get you to allow them to spend on weapons and machinery and all the other costs of war. They need a cover story. They need the public behind them. They need you to do what many of them are doing now, which is, I stand with Ukraine. You're not standing with Ukraine at all. You're sat in your lounge on a sofa with your slippers on and your heating, putting a flag on your Facebook picture on a subject you know nothing about. You've not spent one day researching it. You've gobbled up the mainstream media narrative. Suddenly you trust the man that you've been loathing for the last 6 months, which is Keir Starmer, and it all seems pretty rehearsed to me. So who in the right mind would go and see the senators first, cosy up to some sort of deal, and then go and see the president to tell him what to do? Unfortunately, this fake welcome that he's had across the world from the same Western leaders that were very keen on lockdown, the same Western leaders that helped a drug company make 100 billion in 12 months, and the same Western leaders, many of whom are only almost acting leaders because they're waiting to be out of office, such as Trudeau. And as I sort of predicted about 5 weeks ago, earlier, the setup with Trudeau is Carney will replace him. Carney, who basically ruined the Bank of England and then moved on. They always move the men around like chess pieces. They never disappear. And what you've got to look at, I know it's frightened some people seeing what Starmer's saying, but this is the biggest toothless tiger you'll ever see. Who are these people that set themselves up as judge and jury on where our monies and taxes should be spent and whose weapons to buy? Who are they? It's von der Leyen, it's Starmer, it's Macron, it's Trudeau. They're the main players, all the same players, spewing out the same rhetoric, which is the globalist narrative from the World Economic Forum. Normal people aren't interested in this, they just want to get on with their lives. So I'm going to read a little bit out from a journalist, Christina Aguayo. She says this is her perspective and she's pretty well researched. Zelensky met with anti-Trump Democrats, but I think they were from both sides of the house, who advised him to turn down the mineral deal with President Donald Trump shortly before the Oval Office showdown. Now, before I go on, Trump is ahead of the game all the time. Don't misinterpret his casual attitude and his brash New York attitude where he doesn't use diplomacy, he just gets on with the deal. Trump will have known this. Not to mention that if you look at the 100-year deal that Keir Starmer's done, it's all in the detail. Zelensky's already done a deal for the mineral rights with Starmer in January before Trump was inaugurated. Now, you can't keep selling things twice, unless you're promoting a Ponzi scheme, which wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, according to Democrat Senator Chris Murphy, President Volodymyr Zelensky met with the group of anti-Trump Democrats who told him to reject the terms of the mineral deal with President Trump. The meeting with the Democrats took place on Friday, shortly before Zelensky, Vice President Vance and President Trump got into a heated clash in front of the press pool in the Oval Office. Murphy's posting on X just finished a meeting with President Zelensky here in Washington. He confirmed that the Ukrainian people will not support a fake peace agreement where Putin gets everything he wants and there's no security arrangements for Ukraine. The post was made on Friday morning. Attached to the post was a picture of Zelensky at a conference table with Murphy seated on the opposite side. Less than an hour later, Zelensky showed up at the White House to meet President Trump. The reason for the meeting was to sign the mineral deal. The Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Zelensky had already agreed to do that. We now know that after the meeting with Murphy, Zelensky had no intention of signing it. The Democrats successfully stopped the mineral agreement, which stopped the ceasefire, which stopped the killing that would have been signed. Meanwhile, thousands of people will continue to die every week in Ukraine. Now it moves on from here, doesn't it? Because now President Zelensky is expecting to be protected by Article 5 of the NATO agreement. He's not in NATO. There is no expectation that we should, or NATO members should, defend Zelensky. And when he talks about his people, which people? Because I've got people who are Ukrainian contacting me saying they don't want any more war, they just want the killing to stop. They haven't got enough soldiers, they haven't got enough equipment because they've been selling the new equipment that they got given to them through foreign aid to people in the Middle East on the black market at 20 cents in the dollar. There's lots of reports about this. So it's no wonder that they're not faring very well in a war that could never be won by that side. Bearing in mind, I've pinned at the top of my pages Sachs's address to the United Nations when he explains the chronology of events from 1991 right through the administrations of Clinton and Obama, right to the present day, Bush, beforehand, he had a bit of a hand in it, and then the Biden administration, where it all led to where we sit today. We don't need to sit in this position. There's no need for World War III. And unfortunately, if Starmer does decide to put boots on the ground, he's putting a target on our backs. And these people like Julie Hartley-Brewer, what sickens me with these people is when you're talking about peace, they label you, they're doing exactly what they accuse the left of doing, which is shut you down with an insult and call you a Putin apologist. I don't take much notice of what President Putin's doing because he's never affected my life. I take notice of what my own politicians are doing because they're the ones affecting my life. No, I'm not afraid of Russia or China at this stage. I'm afraid of my own government and the decisions that they're coming to and the calibre of the cabinet because they're just not up to it. We've got David Lammy who thinks Marie Antoinette invented radium, who thinks that Henry VIII came before Henry VII. Sorry. There's a shed load of mistakes that he's made because he's basically, he might have passed a few exams, but he isn't that bright. He's certainly not bright enough to be the foreign minister. And the way he's previously talked about Trump, he obviously didn't expect him to get a second term of office at any time. That's not the way he behaves. I can call people's names because I'm just a blogger. I can be a bit insulting because that's how you can do it, but not when you're going into a diplomatic position, which a minister is. Anyway, the good news is I don't see Richard Tice as that smart. He's had a good upbringing, public education, he's a posh boy, he's okay on quite a lot of subjects, so he's still better than the rest. And I just ignore his Ukraine stuff. But I look at Farage and I see an astute businessman who's had a proper job before he was in politics, who's managed to navigate politics for 30 years about these various comedians that have tried to shoot him down and managed to finally get a foothold in Westminster that can only grow from this stage. And when you see how he's handled it in the Express and on LBC, he's handled it just right. He's kept a fairly neutral stance, but understands the way the Americans have approached this. This is Stephen Miller from the White House support team. Are you ready?
Anybody had any idea that Zelensky would be so impertinent, so disrespectful, so insulting to the United States of America? Look, this is one of the great moments in the history of American diplomacy. The way that President Trump and J.D. Vance stood up for American interests in the world stage, the way that President Trump defended Americans after years of being fleeced and abused and taken advantage of and taken for granted, millions of American hearts swelled with overflowing pride today to watch President Trump put Zelensky in his place. The only reason that Zelensky has a country, that Zelensky is in power, is because of the United States. Americans have suffered economically, funding this war now for years. American security has been degraded, our stockpiles depleted, our ability to project power in other regions of the world negatively affected to protect and defend Ukraine. Americans probably don't even know the true extent of just how much military support on multiple levels and fronts America has provided to Ukraine. And then this man shows up in the Oval Office and lectures us, says we have to do more, says we're not as good as Europe, says that we need to provide them a forever war guarantee, fight Russia till the end of time. No American watching that today says they want to send their sons and daughters to die on behalf of Zelensky. And President Trump was clear and firm and principled, saying either you're our partner for peace in ending this war, or we can't work with you. And Zelensky, for the first time since this has begun, finally met a Western leader willing to assert their own interests, the interests of their own country, and not bow down to and venerate this man as a messianic figure. Americans have watched with horror as Zelensky has been treated as a messiah. Our hearts all break for the suffering and loss and death. But you know what will be even worse? World War III. And today...
Well, I agree with everything that man said. Absolutely, he's treated as a messiah. This is a man who was formerly an actor, not even a good actor, although he seems to have surpassed himself this last 3 years. And we make a welcome for him as though he's Mother Teresa and some great public figure on the world stage. So what you saw was the reaction to previous actions that Zelensky had employed himself by meeting people and doing deals behind Donald Trump's back. Who's to say he hasn't done deals with other European leaders with these mineral rights? It's in that 100-year deal with us that we've got rights to the minerals. Now, because I'm friendly with Mitch Fierstein, who's had who's had interest in mining, he's explained to me just how costly it is to get these precious minerals out of the ground. It's phenomenal. And the word on the street is that most of the minerals are in the Donbass area, which is in the Russian section where they speak Russian. How's that going to play out? This man is rude and arrogant, in my opinion. And I think what he did in the Oval Office was what we saw was a president at the end of his tether, dealing and listening to what this man has had from countries across the world, the usual suspects, the EU willing to shell money out, Starmer willing to shell money out, Trudeau, the usual suspects are all lined up here. The WEF puppets, you can call them what you want. But I think it's good because at the end of the day, if there's no guarantees from the US where NATO's concerned, no one's going to win anything here. Nobody's got the military capability, the money or the soldier in power to even do anything about what they're talking about. And the Lancaster House meeting looked staged and scripted to me. So watch this space. This is a toothless tiger at work, operating on full-blown ego. He must plug himself in at night, Starmer, like you do with an electric vehicle, to wake up tomorrow puffed out again. And we deserve better than this.